Welcome to this week, and what a week it has been. Seems like just yesterday we were here last week talking about stuff. Well, we got a lot more stuff to talk about. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Canadian job market. Sorry, this afternoon. I'm so used to doing an evening when I did Saturday night live stream. I'm so used to doing it in the evening that I just automatically go to tonight, which is kind of funny. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about the Canadian job market. We got some data that's come out on that, which is really, really, really cool. Excuse me. We're also going to be talking about the CPI release that came out in the States yesterday. Spoiler alert, it wasn't really good. And in addition to that, we've also got what in the banana bread is going on with Elon Musk. So we got some more Elon Musk news this week. And we got a whole bunch of hodgepodge, little tiny stories that we're going to just sort of hit on. And of course, this entire chat is stealing a word from the friggin' Oracle. It's powered by you guys. So whatever you guys want to bring up, talk about, you can just throw it in the chat. We will get to everything. That's pretty much how it goes. Okay, before we jump into our first story, I'm just going to say hi to everybody quickly. So, of course, we have the friggin' Oracle. He's always here first. He's got the bragging rights and fire it up. Yeah, absolutely. And we got Scott here, who's in the house. And we've got Jason Spooner in the house, which is friggin' awesome. And hodgepodge is great on rye bread. There we go. Rye bread. One of my favorite breads, I think. I'm not sure. I'm not actually entirely 100% sure what rye bread is. And we've got Sandra B, and we got Lily, got a whole bunch of folks in here. So that's fantastic. All right. So the whole issue with the Canadian job market, I mean, it's been big. We're at that situation where people are like, and it's really funny. A lot of people think that everybody's just sort of not going to work. And they're like, why are these people going back to work? What's going on? And that's not even the case. It's actually completely the opposite. And it'll be interesting. We're going to look at a few of the job numbers that have come out. So first of all, in May, believe it or not, with all these job openings, we actually added new jobs. In total, Canada added 39,800 new jobs in May. So there's another 39,800 jobs waiting to be filled. But here's the interesting thing. The jobless rate. So when I say jobless, that includes everybody who's unemployed, everybody who is, if you're on welfare but you're able to work. It includes all of those people. That number actually fell down to 5.1%. The last time the jobless rate was this low was 1976. Now, a show of hands here. How many of you weren't even born in 1976? And I'm pretty sure at least, well, I do have an older crowd, so probably I would say 30%. I would bet 30% of you guys weren't even around in 1976. Now, here's another interesting statistics. When we look at full-time jobs and part-time jobs, so full-time jobs are up 135,400, which is really, really interesting because I'm going to throw this at you. Part-time jobs were down 95,800. What that means is a lot of businesses are taking their I will learn how to talk someday. What that means is a lot of businesses are taking their full-time or their part-time employees and saying, guess what? You're now full-time. That's been a trend. So we're seeing this flipping happening. So we're seeing a lot of people who were working part-time are being either, maybe friendly coerced up to full-time, which is fantastic. Ken just mentioned I invested in breweries a little too much last night. Holy banana bread, Ken. So in other words, I will try not to be too loud there, Ken, because I don't want to give you a headache. 76, I was a twinkle. Okay. Oh, interesting. Gen X, Canadian investor, says born in 77, so just missed it. Yeah, absolutely. And Peter Ross, blue chip ETFs, SP 500, and total Canadian index is where I'm investing lately. I love blue chip. I also love the S&P 500. So I think that's a pretty good thing. Now, you must be new, Peter. I don't remember seeing you before. If you are new, welcome. It's awesome having you here. I love new people. All right. So this is interesting. So we've got such a tight labor market right now. We're heading towards this thing that is kind of a bit of a dream. It's something called maximum employment. There's that point where you just get a point where you can't really get more people, and we're getting closer and closer to that mythical little place, which is kind of cool and not at the same time. As an employee, you guys are in any of you who are employees are in really good shape, because you're at that situation where you've never had as much power as you have right now, because it's insanely hard for people to replace you. So this works. It works in two ways. You can take the lazy attitude about it and sort of say, well, I'm going to just do the bare minimum because there's no way they'll fire me because I'm too hard to replace. Or you can look at the fact that there's so much opportunity out there. This would be a great time to thrive. Build up your resume, perhaps move into higher positions within the company that you're at. So that's kind of a cool little thing. And friggin' Oracle saying hi to Peter and to MF. And Jordan's in the house. Hey, Jordan. So that's kind of interesting. Now, a lot of companies are at that point where they realize that poaching is becoming a serious thing. So here's an interesting thing. This week, CIBC, they have basically come out and they have increased their base salary for their lower tiered employees by 3%. Now, this is a move that was also done recently by the Royal Bank as well as TD. So they're basically increasing the wages of their lower people to keep them as an incentive for them to stay. So that's pretty kind of cool, I think. It is a way to retain their talent as well as attract some new people, hopefully. Now, 3%, when I hear that, I start thinking about inflation, and 3%, of course, barely even takes a dent out of inflation. And we're going to definitely get to inflation a bit tonight as well, because when we get into our CPI topic, we'll definitely be hitting on inflation. But it's interesting that we're sort of in that situation when it comes to jobs, and people are having managers anyway. Companies who are employers, they're having a lot of trouble attracting that talent. And the interesting thing is, when you hear about these job shortages, they're not they're not high-level jobs that are shorting. They're all the low-level ones. Because if you think about it, if you have been working at a low-level, entry-level position at a company, and then you're given 2 years off with pay, which kind of that's what happened with the pandemic. You're now in that situation where a lot of people, they took that money and they said, let's get some training. I don't want to go back to slinging fries at a restaurant. I want to do something a little bit more important. And I think we've seen a lot of that. And I think that explains the fact that, it's not that these people are still at home. These people aren't. They're working at better jobs. And that's kind of one of those situations that I think we've run into. Now, Gen X Canadian investor says, we also need to increase salary of existing team members to maintain equity, as I'm having to pay a premium for new hires. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things that if you start paying a lot of money to your new hires and they're coming in at a much higher rate in comparison to the scale of your existing staff, there's always going to be that certain level of resentment. Now, it also depends on the type of work too. If bringing in new people and you have to pay a bit more to get them in the door, If it makes the lives a lot easier of some of the existing staff, they may not complain as much. Well, initially they won't complain as much. But when it comes to money, money is that thing that people like to complain about. And it makes sense too, because I know if I was an existing employee and it took me it took me 5 years at a company to get to let's say $20 an hour, and they're starting to bring in new people at like let's say 19, or I would be a little bit piffed. I would be like, holy cow, it took me 5 years to get here, so what are you going to do for me? And I think that's one of those things too, is that employers have to take that into consideration, because otherwise they're going to get, there's a word, it's called churn. So churn, employee churn, when you're talking about HR, what that is that's the amount of employees that you're losing. So you're always, most businesses, you don't have the same staff forever. You always have a certain percentage that are moving in and out, and that would be your employee churn. Because what's really interesting is one of those things, when you're calculating churn and you're calculating your HR, the way you're handling your HR, you're putting a price tag on an employee. So if I hire somebody, I have to spend a whole bunch of resources. First of all, I have to spend the resources on hiring them. So that's paying my HR staff, paying my recruiters, paying any ads that I have out. In addition to that, I'm paying for the time of HR once again to do all the interviewing and the processing. Once I bring that person in, I'm then paying for the training. And then when they do hit the floor, I'm not going to get that full productivity until they've gotten used to their job. So, there's money that's calculated into that. So you can put a price tag on that employee. And so a lot of times you're in a situation where you kind of need that person there for, depending on, well, obviously it's different with every job, but in some jobs you can get to a point where you actually need to keep that person on for about 6 months to break even for all of the expense it costs to get them in there and get them trained. Now, obviously some jobs where there's not very much training and there's really not a big curve, it's going to be a lot less. But that's one of these situations too, that you don't want to create unnecessary churn. So for example, if you are bringing in new people at a higher wage, and you've got the rest of your employees getting a little bit annoyed about that, because they know that they could go to another company and do the same thing they're doing with you, and then they'll get that premium going over there. So you kind of have to weigh all of that out. And I'm always in favor of things being fair. And that's going to keep your churn down. Otherwise, you're going to have high churn. And we're in a situation right now where churn-wise, you don't have that revolving door of people coming in. It's more or less that it's almost to the point where we're going to have bidding wars on the people who are out there, which is going to be very interesting if we get to that point. All right. Out. We had that one. And Ken says, yes, we are looking to fire, but can't. No one wants the job. I think he means hire. Yeah, and that's the thing. You're in a situation. Now, one of the interesting things too, hello, Mountain of Inspiration. Thank you. And just what Mountain just said, he did the thumbs up. If you guys all just go down there for a second and just hit that thumbs up button, it helps out the channel. It helps push this out to people who don't realize we're live at the moment. I always appreciate that. And of course, if any of you haven't subscribed, definitely hit that button too. Then you'll know when this stuff is all coming out, as well as our videos, which is awesome. And there we go. Hit the like button. Absolutely. And hello once again. And that's why companies need to show a 5-year pay chart for new hires so they know where they will stand. Yeah, absolutely. You always want to be transparent with your employees. No way around it. It makes it better. Like if you have an employee who's working there and they have no clue what they need to do if they want to get more money or if they want a better position, then then management has failed that employee. That's information that should be there, whether it be part of the new hire process or whether it just be something that as you're moving along, you work on some kind of a development plan with the staff that you have. Because when it does come time that you have positions that open up higher up within your organization, the absolute best person for the job is usually one of your own staff that you can promote from within. For one, you're going to save money on that training. For two, it gives that incentive so that people within the company know that they can work towards something better and that they're not sort of stuck in that rut. And that's really good for, there's a term, it's called esprit de corps. And what it basically means is it's sort of they use it a lot in the military. It basically means that you have that feeling of belonging amongst everybody, and everybody has that team spirit, and it really can help. I mean, you will get bad apples every so often. Everybody does. But the core group, if you're transparent and you're fair, you can really build a great team of people. And that to me is absolutely fantastic. Steps to success. Absolutely. Which is kind of cool. Okay, now the second thing I did want to talk about today as well is a little bit about the CPI that came out yesterday. So yesterday, the Fed down south, and we talk a lot about the American Fed, even though we're in Canada, because a lot of that stuff, it affects us as well. And usually when things go bad in the US, it's only a matter of time before we feel that up here. So it's always important, I think, to keep your eyes and your fingers on both the American as well as the Canadian market. So both of our markets. So yesterday, they were not expecting numbers to come out as bad as they were because the Fed was beginning to think that inflation had peaked. Well, surprise, it hasn't. Yesterday, they came out with an inflation rate of 8.6 on the CPI. And that was a 40-year high. So think about that, 40 years. That's a long time. So they were actually expecting it to be much lower. I believe last month it was 8.2% in April. So it went up. They didn't hit the peak that they thought they were have. What does this mean? Well, this means that they're going to need to be aggressive. So if they maintain their 50 basis point hikes when they keep hiking every month, the prime rate, they are going to have to keep on doing that for longer than they initially had thought of. And there's that possibility. Now, Powell had put a 75 point, hike off the table, but that was contingent on things getting under control. Things have not gotten under control. So I think we're going to see a 75 point hike. Will it come soon? It might. It might actually come. It could come as early as, well, this week. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I have also heard people starting to whisper of even a full 100 point hike, which would be a full 1%. I don't know if that'll happen, but it really depends on how aggressive they want to be. And now Scott, whose opinion I highly value, he's saying 75, and I'm concurring, Scott. I think it's going to be 75 as well. So I'm concurring. I don't think it'll be a 1. I don't think it's going to get to a point where they go completely off the deep end, because you got to realize that if you get too aggressive with your rates, that's a really quick way to push yourself into a recession. So I don't think they want to do that. I think they're still trying to hit that soft landing, but it's getting more and more hard because a little part of our wheel just fell off, so to say. Now here's just some really interesting things too. We are thinking as well that in July in Canada, there has been whisperings in the Bank of Canada that we're looking at a 75 point hike as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I think we're going to see it both places. I think Canada and the US will both have a 75 point hike. One of the interesting things that when you're looking at the core CPI, it doesn't include food, it doesn't include energy, and that's for the simple reason of the volatility of them, so they feel like it doesn't give them a fair comparison. But the reality is when you're looking at actual inflation, let me give you a couple numbers here. So grocery prices are up this year 11.9%. Electricity, and this is in the States because this is all coming out of the CPI. Electricity is up 12%. Rent's only up 5.2%, but when you think about how big of a number rent is, 5.2% is a significant increase. Airfares, they're up 12.6%. And here's one that's going to hurt the tourism industry. The cost of renting a hotel room in the States has gone up 22.2%. So you start looking at the peripheries and you start looking at these things that the CPI is not really baking into their data too much. And you start to see a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is that inflation, when we talk about that 8.6, well, that number is really small compared to probably what true inflation is. When we actually look at what the average person is paying extra, it's a lot. It's been adding up and it's been getting pretty out of control. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, the same kind of thing is happening here as well. So, and I know a lot of our data is going to be, I think we've got some data being released later this week coming up, and that's going to be definitely a really good indication of what is happening. And okay, so these numbers over a period from April to, yeah, exactly. And Jason says just spent an average 140 American a night for hotels in Florida. That is a lot. And Jason's been down there traveling. So you take Canada, tourism in Canada makes up about, well, before the pandemic, tourism in Canada made up roughly 2% of our GDP, so gross domestic product. And we're now at a point where we're running into issues where tourism is getting difficult because of the airline industry and not being able to, well, once again, they're having difficulty hiring people. So one of the Pearson in Toronto is where they've had the most issues with this. As a result of a lot of the staff shortages in Pearson, they have had to cancel 10% of their flights. And that was just last week. Last week, Air Canada canceled 10% of their flights. If any of you guys were on the Danter Banter on Wednesday night, I'm usually a guest on that show. Nancy Danter had been just recently through the airports, and she gave quite a horror story of what it was like traveling. So you look at cancellations, everything getting completely nuts in the airport, that is going to impact the reopening of tourism. So people in that trade, if you own a tourism business, it's going to impact you until we can get flights basically back to working properly, where we can get at least people into the airport. So it's kind of interesting. And Mountain here was saying that was crazy. Yeah, absolutely. And he's talking, of course, to Nancy Danter's story from Wednesday night. So that's pretty bad. Now, right now, most of the other airports, so Calgary, Montreal, Vancouver, they're running a little more smoothly for now, but it's mostly Pearson at this point. Oh, so definitely a little bit crazy. Okay, now, one of my favorite parts of the night or the afternoon is figuring out what's going on with good old Elon Musk. So we have today got three kind of mini stories from Elon. First, and obviously one of the biggest in the news, is that Tesla has announced their 3-1 potential stock split. It still has to be voted on in August. So that'll be interesting. And it goes against all the speculation, because I had heard speculation that Tesla was going to do a 20-1, And I think people who didn't give into the speculation were just assuming it was going to be another 5-1, but we're looking at a 3-1 split. That will be interesting. Tesla's in that interesting spot right now. Like right now, their share price is down approximately 35% from last year. So they're hurting a little bit. Now, one of the other issues that Tesla has been having has to do with, of course, China. So over in China, they have a production plant in Shanghai. And Elon thought they would be backed mostly to normal with that plant for this quarter. But it turns out they're about a third off. So it's kind of more of those woes that they keep having with Tesla. So Tesla is this company that they're selling all of their products, but right now they can't make their products fast enough to meet the demand. And there's been some speculation as well that a lot of the parts and inflation on different parts that they're having has really cut into Tesla's margin. So Tesla could be in an interesting situation. I have a feeling that their next quarter report is not going to be as rosy as the previous quarter. So that will definitely be interesting. Now, what would a what in the banana bread is going on with Elon be without some Twitter news? So as we all know, Elon's been pressuring Twitter to get their documentation on exactly what they found when it comes to the bots. Twitter has been resistant, and then this week, Elon pretty much threatened to completely walk away from the deal if they didn't comply. Well, Twitter has now complied. They have agreed to provide all of that information to Elon. So that's kind of where we're at on that one. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that's going to work out. But that is coming. So I have a feeling we will have brand new Elon news for next year. All right. And Mountain's mentioning little Elon, little. Yeah. It's one of those things. Here's one of these things. We always talk about the rate hikes in Canada and the United States. Well, over in Europe, we've just found out that the European Central Bank, they're starting to raise rates over there. So in July, they're looking at going up 25 basis points. Now, here's the interesting thing. This will be their first rate hike in more than 11 years. So that's kind of a bigger thing. They're also saying that if inflation doesn't get under control over in Europe, they're going to look at continuing to raise rates as well. So another rate in September. Now, their inflation in Europe right now it's at an all-time high. They had 8.1% inflation last month. And a lot of that, of course, has been accelerated by by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, of course. And a lot right now with the sanctions against Russian oil, the UK is now at a point where they're trying to sort of scramble to get to be able to get the oil that they need. Now, interestingly enough, Canada may very well benefit from this. I know that they're looking at building some kind of ports in Nova Scotia, for example, just to be able to get an export oil out to Europe. So that could be a lot of extra money coming into the pockets of Canada, at least into our oil industry, which is good. Here's another interesting little statistic from Europe. So in the UK, the cost of filling an average gas tank on a car, it's now $125 American, or 100 pounds, if you want to use pounds. That's the first time they've ever been that high. And right now, the average UK gas prices are about $8.60 a gallon. So gas has been going up. I know down in the US, most states, the average gas price is $5 a gallon. And it's interesting. It is predicted in the US that gas price is going to go all the way up to $6 by the end of the summer. So that's showing me that we're nowhere near the end of the energy boom, because gas just keeps on going higher and higher and higher. And we're even at a point right now that oil sands are starting to they're starting to produce more bitumen than they've ever done before. And it's a lot of what's in the oil sands is becoming very, it's in high demand now. So that's very good for Alberta, which is kind of cool. All right. Now, well, I got something a little bit fun here. I want to talk a tiny bit about housing prices. I don't know. Everything's been getting really, really expensive. Now, I have heard that the housing market is supposed to be slowing down a little bit, but whether it does or not, a list came out of the most affordable places to live in Canada. And this is strictly based on how much the average price of a home. Now, if you're looking to get a home nowadays under $500,000, there's not a lot of places that you can go to do that. One place is Halifax, Dartmouth area in Nova Scotia. You can get a brand new house. The average price there is $450,200. So that's not too bad. Well, I mean, it sounds really bad because considering if you went back even a decade, you could probably get an average house for like $300,000. So it has gone up a huge amount. Now that's if you actually were to look at rural Nova Scotia. So if you move outside of the cities, your average home price is coming in at around $397,000. So that's pretty good. Now, in Ontario, if you want to go to North Bay, in North Bay, you can get a house, an average price of $450,000. Now, there are, of course, places if you don't want to pay more than $400,000. There are lots of places. Hey, Brian, there are lots of places you can go. So, Winnipeg, you can get a brand new house on average for $345,500. And hey, you get an NHL team with it as well. So there's a bonus for you. Saskatoon, you can get a new house for $334,600. So that's pretty cool. And now Moncton in New Brunswick, you can get a brand new house on average for $333,000, which is pretty cool. Look at that. Friggin' Oracle read that article too, said that the house market is supposed to drop about 19%. So yeah, so keep in mind, these numbers I'm throwing at you might be 19% lower in a year, which would be kind of cool. If you parlez le français, you could live in Quebec City for $327,000. And now Fahid says, personal taxes are high in the Atlantic. Absolutely, they really are. When you're doing your income tax in the Maritimes, because they're poorer provinces, they do tax a bit more. So the provincial portion of those taxes is higher. Absolutely, 100%. When I lived in the Maritimes, it's funny. I used to say, because they used to have some of the lowest pays, highest taxes. And when you look at this thing called disposable income, like Halifax and Nova Scotia had one of the lowest disposable incomes in the country. And one of the issues they also have is with negative growth population, because a lot of people leave to go other places in the country where they can get better opportunities. But I used to jokingly say that, they keep our wages low and our taxes high, so we can't afford to leave. So, but it is a beautiful place outside of all of the tax issues. But Fahid is 100% correct there. Now, here's another really good option if you want to move to Ontario. If you like Sault Ste. Marie, you can get an average house there for $302,000. All right, now we're going to get into some really cheap places. So Saskatchewan, like rural Saskatchewan, you can get an average house for $291,000. Fredericton, back in New Brunswick again, you can get a house for $291,000. St. John, so if you want to move to St. John, you can get a house for $273,800. And got one left. So the cheapest place in Canada to get a house is, anybody want to take a guess? Come on, guys, just throw me a, I'll tell you this, it's a city. I will give you that. There is a city in Canada that has the cheapest average house price. See if somebody, so come on, one of you guys has to have a guess. I'll give you a hint. It's not Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal. Northwest Territories. Okay, that's not a city, but a good guess, Jason. Yellowknife. Not a bad. Now, keep in mind, I don't know how they did this, all of this survey, so I don't know if they even went up there, because I would think Yellowknife would be pretty darn cheap. But no, it's not Yellowknife. And I'll give you guys another hint. It is a city on the prairies. So there is a city on the prairies. It is not Elliott Lake. It's a fairly large city on the prairies. That's not Winnipeg. Another big city on the prairies, not Winnipeg. It might start with an R. It is not Whitehorse. Starts with an R. Bingo, Regina. And let's just throw this up here. And I apologize immensely because I'm going to attempt to say your name. And the person who got it is Surin Vasula. That's my best guess. I'm probably wrong, and I apologize well in advance. But Vasu. Okay. That makes it easier. If you ever want to have fun, start giving me all of the Russian hockey player names and ask me to start pronouncing them. And it never ends. It never ends well. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, so those are just some of the more affordable places in the country. And it's kind of neat just to see the differences there. What'll be interesting is if that market does, I would assume PEI would probably be fairly reasonable in prices. Another area too that really didn't get hit on with this survey is Cape Breton. I know that the real estate in Cape Breton is pretty darn cheap. I know. Now Saskatoon came in at 334 and Regina at 266. So yeah, that's just surprising. But the prairies, I think if you can handle the winters on the prairies, you can definitely get some cheap real estate there. Oh, is PEI really? Well, that's one of those things too. And I think Fahid might have it here. PEI, one, you've got limited space. And fun fact, PEI is actually shrinking. Most people don't realize that, but a lot of the land is being pulled away. And there's actually a lot of initiatives in there to try to build up some of the land along the shorelines because of the constant waves coming in. It eats away a lot of the sand every year, and they're constantly trying to replace it because if they don't, erosion will eventually do in Prince Edward Island. Now, we're not talking like overnight. It's, we're talking like probably a million years, but it's just a fun little fact about PEI. PEI is beautiful. If you've never been to PEI, you probably should go there. Throw some tourism dollars at them. Actually, one of the best lobster meals I think I ever had was in a small town called Montague on PEI. So that was not too bad. All right. And Lily wants to point out that Saskatchewan is not that cold in the winter. It actually has quite a bit of sun. Okay. That's fair enough. Now, she originally comes from the prairies, so she would definitely know. And it is very flat. It is. The very first time I ever went through the prairies is it was at night, and I was carpooling with some folks, and they're a little bit on the hippie side. So they decided that, we have to pull over. We're going to run out into the middle of this field here and then look up at the stars and spin. And I'm like, seriously? They're like, yeah, come do it. I humored them and I did it. And it actually was kind of cool because you've got no horizon. So it's almost like you're flying through space and you just see everything sort of spinning. It was very, very, very cool. And Jason found PEI boring. And I can understand that. I can understand. There's a lot of potato fields. And there's really, between some of the big, there's not a lot in between some of the bigger settlements. So, going from, for example, Charlottetown to Summerside, you're just driving through field upon field. So it could definitely be considered boring in that way. We still pay for the bridge. Yeah. That's one of those bridges that honestly, I would be a little leery driving across the Confederate Bridge. In my day, anytime I used to go to PEI when I lived in Nova Scotia, we always took the ferry. I've never done the bridge. It just seems to me if you're out in the middle of that bridge and the weather gets really rough and they didn't have foresight to close it ahead of time, that would be a very scary drive, I would think. And Jason here says, Cape Breton, my favorite place in the Maritimes. Cape Breton is awesome. I've spent a little bit of time in Cape Breton as a kid. I had an aunt who used to live in a little fishing community called Discoose. So we used to go up there every so often. I've seen some odd things. One of the oddest things I've seen in Cape Breton is I went up there once and it was squid season. Apparently every 10 or so many years, the squids all come in. And you'd look in the ocean and all you could see was squids. It was almost like the ocean was made of squids. But that was just really, really, really cool. A lot of great stuff in Cape Breton. We used to do a lot of clam digging. If you've never been clamming before, it's a Nova Scotian thing. You go out, you dig up the clams, you put them in a big bucket with salt water, you take them back and you have a clam bake, and it's just fantastic. Now, another thing with Cape Breton, you've got the Cabot Trail. The Cabot Trail is big. Now, if you're a tourist and you're going to hit the Cabot Trail, they know that you've got no competition. So if you don't bring your own food with you, you're going to overpay at any restaurant on the Cabot Trail. It's going to be fantastic food, though. I will tell you that. But you are going to pay a premium for it because, well, like I said, no competition. But when you drive around the Cabot Trail, make sure you've got lots of extra chargers for your phone. Make sure you've got lots of space because you're going to get a lot of great pictures, scenery shots of the ocean, the hills, the mountains around the outer part of the trail, and the wildlife. Like I don't think you can make it around the Cabot Trail without seeing a coyote, for example. So it's a hugely great trip. It's a lot of driving trip because it's a long trip, but it is fantastic. I think the Confederation. Oh, there we go. I meant Confederation. I don't know why I said Confederate though, but yeah, that's a holy banana bread. That's a boo-boo. Definitely Confederation Bridge because we're talking about Canadian Confederation. I'm so enjoying this Canadian content. Absolutely. And that's one of the things. Well, it's really interesting. I was watching some videos the other day on this new bill they got, C11, which is basically giving this, it'll give the CRTC a bit of more leeway to, control some information when it comes to content creators and it comes to YouTube and things like that. And I was thinking if that passes, I might every video have to just pop up a little beaver or something on the screen just to make sure I hit my Canadian content quota. But this video here, like this live stream, oh, we're totally hitting the Canadian content this time. It's like, come on. But yeah, so that'd be kind of cool. It'd be like product placement, have a moose stick its head in, maybe have a hockey stick in the background, maybe have a stop in the middle of every video so that I can have a quick waffle with some Canadian maple syrup on it. So, but that would be kind of cool. Was out to Halifax for work and my wife's family from New Brunswick. Nicest folks ever live in the Maritimes. Absolutely. That's kind of what it's funny. Canada has this reputation of being very polite. And yeah, from the rest of the world's perspective, Canada is super polite. But then you go to the Maritimes, and it's like polite on steroids. And it's always been that way. Now, I think it's probably not as polite as it used to be. I know when I was a kid living there, we didn't even lock our doors, and anybody could just sort of come walk in, and it was kind of very, very that kind of family type oriented society. But I mean, now it's people lock their doors now, but it never used to be that way. But I think on general, if you're ever in a place where you need some help and it's the Maritimes, you're in luck. You can pretty much just ask anybody for help, and they're gonna help you out. So it's kind of a neat little thing. It's one of the great things too. And I know even myself right now, like I try to bring a lot of my that whole maritime flavor with me everywhere I go. So it's one of those interesting things. Like I don't swear a lot. I don't want to say I never swear. I can swear if I really have to. But I have my banana bread thing, which I use. And part of that whole reason for that is just that I don't know. I grew up where you just did not swear as a kid. It just wasn't something you did, unless you wanted to get a spanking. And of course spankings are now gone away too. So that's kind of good. And Jason said I had a great lobster sandwich on the trail, not terrible price, great hiking also. Yeah, lobster sandwich is good. It's kind of really neat. When you live in Nova Scotia, you kind of get a feeling for, roughly when there's going to be extra lobsters, when the fishermen on the side of the road are going to be selling them a little bit cheaper. So you can often get really good lobster, some really good price. But here's the funny secret about lobster. I mean, lobster tastes great, but it's one of those things you just don't want to have all the time. My mom is always like, "Oh, I think I want lobster. I think I want lobster." And I'm like, "Nah, I had lobster last month. I'm good for another month." And lobster is one of those foods that it takes a lot of work to eat it. Because you've got, well, heck, if you're totally into lobster, you'll have like your little lobster bib, and you'll have nutcrackers and everything. It'll almost look like, have you ever seen the movies when they're going to torture somebody and they open up that bag with all them instruments in it? That's what eating a lobster is like, because you got all of these different instruments for breaking everything on that lobster. Now, here's the thing. If you are a true lobster connoisseur, you can eat that entire lobster without any instruments at all. So what you do is you start with one of the claws. So you pull off a claw, and you're going to use that claw as your instrument for breaking into other parts of the lobster. And you can totally do it. And you can eat that whole lobster, and you can get all the meat out without actually using all of those things. Now, mind you, your hands get a workout as you're doing that. I don't want to make it sound like it's super easy, but it's definitely, it's definitely doable. Lobster used to be considered poor man's dinner down east. I don't know. I think in my family, at least, lobster was always considered to be a treat. I think the poor person's dinner in the Maritimes has always been like craft dinner. And that used to be one of those things that's like, well, there's two nights. As a kid, there were 2 nights I did not want to hear about. It's like, what are we having for supper, Mom? Oh, we're going to have some craft dinner. It's like, oh, again? And then the other one is, what are we having for dinner, Mom? Oh, it's a help yourself night. Dear banana bread. Usually a help yourself night means that you take 2 pieces of bread, throw some mayonnaise on it and a slice of processed cheese and throw it in the microwave. That used to be what would end up happening. So those 2 nights weren't that good. But then again, at the same time, I mean, you had to take what you could growing up. And a lot of people in the Maritimes were pretty poor because, well, going back to what Fatih had said about, or Fahid had said about the taxes and everything else. Yeah, it used to be that way. You know, a lot of families were not super wealthy in Nova Scotia, but that's a beautiful thing. Like, I know as a kid, anytime I wanted to have good food, I would just go visit one of my aunt or uncles on. I'd usually show up around. Well, most times supper's served at 5, so I'd show up about 4:30. Usually between 4 and 4:30, and I would get myself an invite, and they'd always have such good food. You know, so instead of the craft dinner at home, I was having Swedish meatballs at my aunt's. So it was one of those things. And the big thing about that is luckily I had a lot of uncles and aunts, so I could rotate them in and out, so it didn't feel like I was taking advantage of any particular one. So one of those things. So we got about 10 minutes left, people. So throw any questions you guys got, or anywhere you want to take the conversation in the last 10 minutes. Craft dinner is Stone's delight. And you know what's really interesting now that we're talking about craft dinner? I was looking at some videos on YouTube. Surprise, I watch YouTube. I actually was watching a Mr. Beast video, and it was just like, these are things I found on Amazon that you won't believe. And one of the things that he found was a roast chicken flavored candy cane. I'm like, really? So I went to I went to Amazon. I tried to see if I could find it. I didn't, but I found a macaroni and cheese flavored candy cane. I was like, oh my God, why would people do that? Now, mind you, where it's out of season, if you wanted to get a small box of that candy cane, you're looking at $40. So not something I'm going to try. Now, Dave D says, yes, my dad told me he had a lobster sandwich at school. He would hide it. Only the rich kids had peanut butter and jam. Well, yeah, peanut butter and jam. And I never liked jam that much. I would just have straight peanut butter. There was also this other sandwich stuff. There was a sandwich spread that was like, it had mayonnaise in it and a few, I think it was like mayonnaise and pickles or, relish kind of mixed together. I can't remember what the heck it was called, but it was pretty gross. But I liked it for some reason, so I used to have that. I also was okay with a mayonnaise sandwich. Now, probably the worst sandwich I ever had, and I don't know if this is just a maritime thing or not, but it is a sugar sandwich. My grandmother used to make it. She'd take 2 pieces of bread, she'd put some butter on them, then she'd pour a ton of granulated white sugar on it and smash them together, and whatever didn't fall out, that was what you were going to eat. And it was crunchy, but I don't know why. I think all of us kids, we loved it. And it's, of course, comes to no surprise that we all have intense sugar cravings, and it's probably that sugar sandwich's fault. That's what I say. I blame the sugar sandwich on that. And so here, yeah, so Ken they had their first, so lard and brown sugar. See, and I would think that would taste better than the white sugar. So that's kind of the way I'm kind of leaning on that one. But it's funny. Well, I know as well, when I was a baby, if I used to cry, my grandmother used to take my soother, stick it in the sugar, and then stick it in my mouth, and that would shut me up. I completely understand why I love sugar. So it's one of those things. Oh, look at that. Dave D. Molasses and butter sandwiches. Do you know what I love? I actually love molasses cookies. I don't know if everybody likes molasses cookies, but I definitely love them. I love molasses cookies so much that I bought some once when I came back to Nova Scotia to visit my mom. I've never really found them out here around here that much, but I bought some and I brought them to her house, and she had a mouse problem. I didn't know she had a mouse problem, so I just did these molasses cookies. I put them on the floor, and didn't a mouse chew open one side of my bag of cookies and ate about, well, it didn't eat much, but it ate a bit of my cookie. I saw that and I figured out, it was a mouse. I looked at it and I'm like, it's a molasses cookie. But a mouse was eating it. What do I do? What do I do? So I dug deep and I said, you know what? You have a really great immune system. Let's eat the cookie. So I ate the cookie. Simple as that. I didn't get sick, so everything was okay. But, it's just one of those things that sometimes you have interesting food. And now I'm hoping that Gen X is saying this about molasses cookies because they are fantastic. Or it might be the molasses and butter sandwiches he's talking about. Syrup on my ice cream. You know what I used to do? I used to have peanut butter and syrup sandwiches. So I put peanut butter on one side. I'd add some pancake syrup or something on the other, and it'd be nice and sweet. It actually tasted pretty good, but I just imagine it would be a sugar overload from the syrup, and especially now that you sort of understand, like the high fructose corn syrup and how bad that is for you. It's not something I would do anymore, but as a kid, you didn't know what high fructose corn syrup was. You just knew what was, right? And Brian says, if the market keeps dropping, I'll be eating that again. Yeah, well, that's the thing about the market, right? As long as, I don't mind the market falling because I've gotten a lot of good deals, but I do, I can understand if you're in a situation that you get forced to sell and you have to then all of a sudden take a loss, that would absolutely suck. Now, speaking of the market, tomorrow's video, just hit on that very briefly. I am going to be talking about some of the best oil ETFs out there. And I will tell you, there is one oil ETF that if you had bought a year ago, well, you would be insanely happy today. So I just want to put that out there. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is because I don't want to spoil things. But we're going to look at some oil ETFs tomorrow. I think that's going to be fantastic. A little bit later in the week, going to be dropping some video about bonds. So bond ETFs, is there a way to make money with bonds? Or, is that just a lost cause? We're going to talk a little bit about that in that video as well. So those are two things I got coming up. I also, on the back burner, somebody last week asked if I could do a video on PPL. So that is on the back burner. So that probably might be out next week. That might be next week's. And I'm also thinking about dropping just an extra bonus video. I don't know if it'll be this Saturday or next, but one of the goals I have for this channel is I don't want to just be a list channel. Like, hey, here's some great stocks. Here's some great stocks. I want to do a little bit of other stuff. I want to do a little bit of, like every so often I do, educational videos, or I do some videos about just ways you can save some money. So I'm looking at doing just something in that vein, just as a bonus video. So that way you still get all the normal content, just something a little extra. So that I'm looking at doing that pretty darn soon. And let me see here. Yes, we have my wife's grandmother's molasses cookie recipe, the best. That sounds insanely good. Holy cow. Yeah. Most of the molasses cookies I've had have not been homemade. They've been from like Sobeys. So if your wife can make you a homemade, you're in heaven, Gen X. You are in heaven. And I don't even know how to laugh that way. It's like you're laughing and then something tastes good and you've gone into it. All right. That's kind of cool. All right. Dying seconds here, guys. Keep in mind, if any of you guys are not on my Facebook group, we do have a Facebook page. It's Mountain Finance. Just do a search. You'll find it. Feel free to come on over there, jump in. If you guys want something like a specific video of some sort, just let me know, because I really do try my best to get out what you guys are looking for. And sometimes there's, we'll take the recent video I did on Canadian Western Bank. I did that as a request. And also the Brookfield one just the other day, that was a requested video as well. So I will do requested videos, because sometimes there's maybe some company that you think people would be interested in hearing about. And for some reason, none of the YouTubers are doing it. Well, I'll do it. Just let me know. And that will be fantastic. Anyway, this has been another wonderful afternoon. Time sure flies when we're doing this. Next week, we'll be back here once again live to do this one more time. Well, we'll keep on doing it, but we'll do it once again. Hopefully Elon does something this week so that we can have Elon back, and we'll pull up some more information. This has been you guys have been fantastic this afternoon. I have had a lot of interaction from you guys, so I absolutely love that. Be sure to come back, bring your questions, bring your comments. And if you want to turn, like this video, the second half of this video pretty much was just talking about Nova Scotia. If that's what you guys want to talk about, we'll talk about it. Or if we want to talk about BC next week, we'll talk about BC. We're okay. We're okay with all of that. Anyway, I just want to thank you guys all for being here. You guys have been fantastic. It's been a wonderful afternoon. And next week, we'll do this again. So take care, everybody. It has been fantastic once again. Bye-bye.